and then it goes into this secondary notch.
Oh yeah. It's gonna be perfect, I think.
That was wide open. None of the other carburetors I've ever messed with from the factory came with that wide open.
All right, guys. This week we're gonna do things. We're gonna do something kind of a little bit different. This week is gonna be a little bit of an experiment. So you guys saw us last week. We went and rebuilt the carburetor. Actually, probably 2 weeks ago now. We went and rebuilt that old Busch Series carburetor that we had. That was on more than likely on the V6 cars back in the 90s. It's a 600 HP Holley. You guys can see all that. We use our WAF Racing 3D printed toolkit to fully disassemble it and then put it back together with a new kit. So you can check that out. That will be, it's a good video, we like it. So check that out and you can see their toolkit and how it works and then learn more specifically about this carburetor. But we'll tear into it a little bit more as we go forward. But what we want to do, we're going to put that carburetor on this car for a couple reasons. So basically what we want to do, first I was to understand when we put our rebuild kit in, if everything's good with it. That's first off. And second off, we want to kind of understand what's going on in this carburetor. Is there anything special about it? When we took it apart, there wasn't anything just that really stood out as kind of extraordinary. Like you would kind of assume there would be some things in there on a race carburetor like this, maybe some tricks, ingenuity, I think is what you might call it. Some ingenuity in the carburetor to try and get some more performance out of the engines. So we were curious if maybe that exists and we hadn't seen it while we were taking it apart. So a good way to do that is put it on the car and see what it's doing. So that's kind of what we're going to do this week. We're going to put it on. There are no guarantees that this is going to work. There's just as good of a guarantee that we put this on and we end up just having to take it back off and put the old one on. So let's see what we get into. So getting into the kind of the interesting things about this, if you look at the throttle linkage here on this carburetor, we've actually never seen one exactly like this. You can see that whenever you go part throttle, there's a notch here in this plate, and then it goes into this secondary notch. Now the thing is that it doesn't, if you watch the bottom there, it doesn't actually, the secondaries do start to open a little before this ever gets there, but it does appear that for the most part, the secondaries are coming in this second notch here on that throttle linkage. So I'm going to rely on you guys a little bit here. I have looked into it to try and find exactly where this came from, what it's from. Is it a modified part? Is it something you've seen before? Jump down in the comments there and tell me if you have seen a linkage like this and exactly if it was something specific to NASCAR and the Busch Series. This was run in the 90s, so it was somewhere about that time. So we're just curious if there's anything that you guys have seen before. But this is a thing, this is one of the first things that stood out to us whenever we got this thing out of the box. The other potentially good thing about it is it does look at that this piece here is the same as the one that's on the carburetor that's on the car right now. So we're thinking that our throttle linkage is going to basically just bolt right up to this. I know I'm jinxing myself and I shouldn't say that right now, but that's what it looks like. And we'll jump in here under the hood and see what I'm talking about here. But there is some differences because of this, but I think that it's going to be okay and it should just bolt right up. So this is the Holley 600 that's on this car. Like I said, it appears that this linkage is the same on that other carburetor, so we're hoping that this lever is just going to go right back into that same hole, which is really going to kind of simplify everything here. You can see that this the mechanism back here for the throttle linkage on this thing is pretty complicated. I know it's shocking that it's on a Ford and it's pretty complicated, but we'll go ahead and strip this stuff off, pull this old carburetor off, and go ahead and get ready to drop in our new one and see if we need to make any changes.
Now that we got the carburetor off of the Fairlane, you can see a direct comparison between the two throttle linkages here. So this is more traditional, what we've seen, and then this guy right here is what this one is, and what we're trying to kind of see where it came from. Was it made? Was it custom made, or was it something that was made by Holly or something? So get you guys on that again, show you this direct comparison. One thing I do see that I noticed as I took it off, we have a tube for our vacuum hose for our vacuum advance on the distributor on the base plate of this carburetor. We do not have that on this one. So Dad's actually working on another carburetor right now, and when he gets done, we'll talk about that and see what we need to do with it. One nice thing after we got this carburetor off that we realized is that this accelerator pump here has been leaking, and if we go over here and look in the intake, you can actually see that it's puddled up in there. So now we have justification for changing the carburetor. All right, before we put our new one on, I'm going to go ahead and put on our new fuel feed line. This is a marketplace find we found the other day. Hopefully it's going to do what we want and not leak. We'll go ahead and get these legs in here. It has this part of it also. It's going to work out really well, and we have some AN to barb fittings that we're going to use here for this, and I think it's going to work out really well if everything seals up like it's supposed to. One thing we have noticed on all of these feed lines that we've gotten recently is that the line is actually, it's always a little too long actually, but it kind of works out okay because you can kind of make this S shape a little bit with them, and it clears all your accelerator pump levers and all that stuff, and then go ahead and tighten those down also. Time to go ahead and see if this is going to clear everything. Oh yeah, check that out. That's going to be really nice, I think. Fuel line clears all of this. This sets up nice. I'm very, very, very happy with that. Now kind of the big question is, will this go right in place? And it sure looks like it will. Oh yeah. It's gonna be perfect, I think. Go ahead and get this thing bolted down, and the throttle linkage picked up, and the only thing we'll have to do is add a port here in the intake for vacuum, and our return spring here can go right just like that. That's gonna be perfect. This is a lot easier so far than I expected it to be. Now that all this bolted up how we wanted it, we're going to run that 90 fitting on this and run our fuel line around the distributor this way and run it in like that, something like that. We'll shorten that up a little, do it that way. That should clean up things a little bit more. And then the other thing I'm going to do is, because I need a port for our vacuum, we're going to go into this port right here. I've already soaked it in some Gibbs penetrating oil, and we're going to put a fitting into that and then run this hose around here and go to that fitting, and that'll give us vacuum to our vacuum advance. Alright, made a quick trip up to the NAPA store, got our fitting in place here, got our hose in place, and now we are ready to see if this thing's going to fire up. Just so you know, and we talked about it earlier, talking about this linkage, we're curious about how this linkage is going to function. So you see it's a two-part deal. This whole thing is primaries, and then the second notch is secondaries. So all secondaries, and the secondaries come in pretty quick. So we're curious about how this is going to kind of run and drive. But anyway, we're going to fire it up right now
go ahead and make sure everything is gonna idle and everything is set where it needs to be. Dad's already got everything ready to kind of do that.
Okay. Have I a little high?
Maybe. Probably only turned like $2,000.
All right, try it again. Crank good though, didn't it?
Crank really good.
Secondary blade is way too. I'm still out of 2.5.
All the way down.
There, it's too high. It's got the
Oh, okay.
secondary. It's too
Too open.
open.
The
Yeah.
blades are too open.
I'm completely off of it. It's still out and probably over a thousand.
Gotcha. Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. So what we need to do?
I think that's the correct spot. It's
The pain.
yeah.
All right. Ready to turn it off?
Until they had this on them over the large
Camshaft. All right, so fired up really well. What we run into there, if you couldn't hear it, who's you?
Oh wow.
Oh,
Sorry, lunch is ready.
okay. What we run into there was that this thing's idling way too high. Even with the idle screw turned all the way down, it was still idling probably over 1,000. We don't have a tach in this car, so we don't know the exact number. So we're gonna have to go in there and close the secondary throttle blades a little bit. So to make this adjustment, the screw is right here, but the head of it is actually down here on the bottom. And we didn't have anything we could get to with it, so I went ahead and unbolted the carburetor, and I'm gonna set it up so that Dad can get a screwdriver in there to it.
All right, that should make a huge difference.
Okay. Start it
Crank
again. Stand up. Well, we'll do it again. All right, we went back and forth. Dad has pulled this thing off a couple times. We've been doing some kind of tuning with the idle air bleeds themselves. We'll go ahead and start it right now how it is. What's in it now?
70s.
70s. We got 70s. We had 74s to begin with. We went to 70s on the idle air bleeds, and now we'll just go ahead and start it and show you kind of what it's doing now. And we think we're probably going to end up going down to 67s on those idle air bleeds. But let's go ahead and start it back up and see what it's doing right now with those 70s in there. Man, the thing starts so good. All right, so you can kind of hear it in the idle there. It's just a little too fat, so it's still rich. So that's why we're gonna go ahead. So I had said Dad went from 74s to 70s. He actually then went to 65s, it was 65 was too much. Super lean. Now we're back at the 70s. It's still a little rich. That's why we think the 67 is going to fall us right in the middle where we need to be. So we'll go ahead and swap those now. All right, let's fire it up again. This time with the 67s in. We're probably going to have to make some adjustments to the idle air mixture screws. I can't get over how good that thing starts. So one thing that we're checking whenever we do this is when Dad revs it up, or just checking it at idle, checking to see if there's any black smoke or anything coming out of this, to see if it's too rich. If it's too rich, it's gonna, of course, you're gonna have the black smoke coming out of it. This looks okay right now. Here, Daddy. So we took it out driving. Dad's really happy with it. He really likes this carburetor right now. Just kidding. We've had a lot of issues with it so far. It won't idle down. It's still idling up way too high. Our throttle return spring's not the strongest, or is not strong enough to return that throttle linkage. It handled the old one fine, but it's a little different with this one. But so definitely not like super ideal, but like we talked about, this thing was made for a race motor. I'm not surprised about this at all, to be honest with you. So I mean, it was made specifically for like a race application, so to kind of get it to tune down, basically tune it down to fit on this very stock motor, yeah, not super surprising. It is many days later. We are finally back here in the shop after all of us kind of been under the weather a little bit, and now we are back and we're trying to work on this carburetor some more. So last time you saw it, we took it out for a drive. We weren't super happy with kind of how it was acting. The throttle return spring wouldn't return the throttle. It wasn't strong enough to pull it back to a closed throttle basically, and we were still having issues trying to get it to idle. It was idling too high. So Dad has really deconstructed this thing and kind of pulled it apart, and I'm going to get him to kind of talk you through kind of what he found.
on it, and then what we think is going on and why we can't get it to idle. So I think probably what will end up happening here, well, we're going to put this thing back together with some of the things that we have done, and we will put it back on the car and just do another couple little test drives, see how it acts, see if that throttle return string is going to return it, how it idles and stuff, check the timing, a few little things. But we think probably what's going to end up happening here is that this carburetor for now will just kind of go on back on a shelf. We just wanted to kind of see how it acted and what we could do with it. So what we'll do probably is this one will probably come back off the car, go on a shelf, and we'll just rebuild and put the old 600 that was on that car that was working really, really well back on it, because it's way more than enough for this car and what we're doing with it. So that's just what I want to let you know, kind of what our plan was and what we're thinking. So quite a bit of work here to kind of come full circle, to kind of end up back where we were. That's okay, that's how this stuff goes sometimes.
Biggest thing we found, I don't know exactly, like Jake said, this thing is set up for an engine with a much bigger camshaft. To be fair with you, I don't know exactly what engine they had this carburetor on. I'm thinking it was probably a V6, and I don't know exactly, probably about a less than 300 inch V6. I don't know the particular cubic inches of those engines that they used, probably in the 90s. But this thing was set up for an engine with a lot bigger camshaft, a lot less vacuum. They did some things to it. I don't think it was, I could try to dissect as what they were trying to do. I don't know exactly if the man that fixed his carburetor is who I've heard he was. He was a genius with carburetors, but I think he fixed it for this particular type engine. He didn't fix it for an 88302. So anyway, I've tried to figure out exactly what he'd done. The only thing I can figure that he did it was kind of questionable to me is this, where the air cleaner screw comes through the center of the center section right here. That was wide open. None of the other carburetors I've ever messed with from the factory came with that wide open. But the first time we cranked it, if you remember, the idle probably went to 3,000. And it was because it had a 5/16 of an inch vacuum leak right through the center of the carburetor directly in the intake manifold. They would have had to done some trickery to have got air through that with an air cleaner stud. They'd have had to re-drill the air cleaner stud or done something. And I don't even know they've done that. I don't know why they did. I don't know why the carburetor was like it. But for whatever reason, this thing, I cannot make it idle down. I backed the idle screws completely off, both of them, the primary and the secondary idle screws. This one and this screw here, I backed both of them completely off, and it's still idle. So it's getting air somewhere that I can't figure out. Just to be fair with you, I can't figure out exactly where it's getting it. So, like he said, we're gonna put the air cleaner stud back in it. We pulled the vacuum for the vacuum advance on the distributor straight off the intake manifold. I'm gonna mess with that a little bit, see exactly where the timing is. And if this don't work, like he said, we're gonna just ease this thing back on the shelf. The accelerator pump was leaking a little bit on that other carburetor that came off the engine, so I replaced that accelerator pump. Got that leak stopped, so probably what we'll end up doing if we can't get this thing fixed pretty quick, we're just gonna set this thing back on the shelf and put that old carburetor back on it. I know it works, it gets pretty decent fuel mileage, so I think that's the plan for right now. We might run into something later, but right now I think that's what we're gonna try to do. Change pump. Didn't change the pressure, just change the flow. You don't change the vacuum pressure.
Well, that's what I'm a little confused about. That's what I kept thinking.
That's what it is. And I knew that. I described it wrong, but I knew that.
back closed now?
Alright,
Oh.
4, brand X. Plug it down right there. I said it changed the flow, but it didn't change the pressure. And it don't change the pressure, it changes the flow. And the flow is not what makes the difference, it's the pressure.
Right. But that's what I still don't understand. I would think, in my head, that fitting on that carburetor was what did I say, 125? And then that one right there is 200. But the pressure is the pressure. Like
Exactly.
the vacuum in the
Exactly.
engine is the vacuum.
Exactly.
It don't matter about that.
That's
But
exactly right.
but what's the difference? So what changed? That's what I'm trying to understand. What changed? Yes, we
Don't
changed.
change unless you unhook the vacuum and bounce on the carburetor, on the distributor.
But it was idling fine with the other carburetor, is what I'm saying. And we had that hooked up to the lower base plate. But now we went to the intake manifold, and it's not. And that's the only thing that's changed was the,
I don't know.
I don't know,
But I bet if you put that other carburetor on,
you do the same thing.
it'll idle this fine. Well, that, if you went to the other carburetor, okay, you left the plug out of that center hole, the air cleaner stud hole, and you know how fast it idles.
Yeah,
So that's another thing that makes me think that prick's getting
air from somewhere
idle
else,
air, getting vacuum from someplace else.
someplace else. So we're back to where we
Back where
were.
we started, where it's just not hardly as bad without the vacuum and bounce on the distributor.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. You want to go drive it with this and
I guess you
see
got
what
the
it's
distributor,
like?
man.
See what it's like? Yeah, I'll double check it. We have this thing back out on the road driving it, and not much different, to be honest. It's kind of it's still got a little bit of a fish bite, especially at low speed. Low speed, just part throttle. It's got a little bit of a fish bite. I don't know. Well, like we were talking about, this carburetor was really designed and built to be put on a cup car. They're not run at part throttle very often. They're run at 50+% throttle all the time. You know, I would say at least, especially back then, and probably on those V6 cars, they were probably even a bigger percentage of on throttle time, I would guess. But anyway, so this carburetor really we're just trying to force it to work in an application that it was not designed to be run in, really, or has probably been changed a little. So we're a little stumped. So we're gonna head back to the shop and probably just pull it off for now. Probably think about it some more, but we've got that good 600 sitting up there. We know it works. Dad put a new accelerator pump in it. We're gonna put it on, and we'll probably wrap up this video with that. Well, I lied to you. We brought it back to the shop. We swapped out the idle air bleeds. We went from what?
67 to 74.
We went from 67s up to 74s, which is where we were when we started. So now we're gonna try it again. I don't know if you've ever watched anybody drown before, but I imagine it's a lot like watching this video. So we still have our part throttle fish bite. It might be a little better than it was, but one thing about it, this thing runs really good anytime you're not at part throttle. Basically, anything above part throttle, it runs really, really well. And again, it's probably where this thing was kind of made to live, to be fair. But I think we're gonna go back and do a little more swapping of carburetors now. We got the other carburetor back on. We got it back going, back idling. Everything's set how we think it needs to be. We're gonna go take it for one last drive here, see how it does. Should be good. We changed both the accelerator pumps. Both of them were kind of seeping a little bit. You can hear our fans kicking on. And all this, so we put those fans on this a few videos ago, and through all this weather, all this driving we've done, until we had it sitting here idling this evening after we drove it quite a bit, it's the first time that the fan has been on, or any of this cooling system on this thing is very, very good. So we're gonna take it safe for a drive, see how it does. If it's good, we'll leave it. We'll leave that guy in a shed somewhere. That guy right there in a shed somewhere. As expected, this carburetor is really doing great. I mean, it has always done good since Dad's put it on. It's been really a good piece. So, yeah, that's the saga of the carburetors. This thing, Dad did go up 2 jet sizes, and we really think that it has made it run a little better. It runs really good. You get into it, and the further you pull, it really just keeps pulling. It does a really good job. So, anyway, I think this is the one that we'll keep on this for now. Let's get back to the shop and wrap this up. All right, guys, that's gonna wrap us up this week. I started out this video telling you it was gonna be a little bit of an experiment. It kind of went how I expected, but also it was a little bit more work than I was expecting as well. So going back and forth on this and kind of thinking back on it, we've said it a few times throughout that basically this carburetor was built very specifically, and honestly was probably modified very specifically with a certain engine application in mind. And that's what's cool about a carburetor, I think, is that there was a lot of, especially in like circle track and cup racing, where there was a lot of room for innovation, right? These guys they were always thinking and trying to come up with new ideas on how to put more air into the engine, therefore being able to put more fuel along with it and stuff like that, and then kind of having to sneak the system and kind of play with it. And so that stuff like that is very interesting to me. I wish that we could have kind of come to a final conclusion on like maybe where that extra air is coming from and why it kind of acts so differently on this engine. And maybe one day we can kind of dig into it. We're planning on having Brian Mace back here in a few weeks so we can do another tech shed video, and I'm going to talk to him and see if maybe there's something that he knows about from his days when he was building engines for circle track cars. Maybe something they had done, or maybe something that he'd heard that was potentially being done to carburetors like that. So let's see, maybe we can kind of maybe we can come up with something and with a final answer. But right now we don't have it. So we've got the old 600 back on the Fairlane here, and it's going to live there for a while. We're hoping that this is probably the last time we have to work on the Fairlane this year. We hope, fingers crossed. And not that we had to do this. This is just kind of for our own entertainment. So anyway, so we learned a few things. It's very specific. It's a little bit different. It didn't work on this car, but this car is very, very, very mild for what it was used to being used on. So thank you guys so much for watching. As always, we are on here, man. We crossed 3,000 subscribers, crossed over 10,000 followers on Facebook, and to be honest, we've done that in less than 2 years at this point, and I just really appreciate everybody that's followed along with us. We have people that watch every week, and I think that's really cool, and we just enjoy doing this, probably even more than we ever expected to. So we'll keep going. We're going to keep digging. I promise we're going to get back on the 55 as soon as possible. We have a few things we've had going on this year, and it's kind of changed our direction for the channel a little bit this year. But we're really, really hoping to get on the 55 over the winter. So there's some stuff to come for it here fairly soon. So anyway, that's it. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, all of the places. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you learned something, if you enjoyed this. This one, I feel like this video is probably a little bit more loosely edited maybe than what we normally do. I'm hoping to kind of have it to where you maybe see our thought process and thinking a little bit more, where it seems like more often than not I kind of would tell you what we're going to do and maybe show you bits and pieces of the steps and then kind of the final product, where this has been more of us just kind of thinking out loud in points and trying to figure out what's going on. And so that's kind of how it is around here, really. So it's a little bit more, even more realistic, I would say,
hopefully you've enjoyed being right here in the shop with us. So we will see you guys next week when we're back here in the shop working on something else. Thank you guys.